All right. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome as we enter the room. I see numbers going up. We have a very nice crowd tonight. We always discuss how big of a room we're going to have. We're going to see. It's going to be in the hundreds though tonight. So that's cool. This is obviously a hot topic, the PSAT. It's coming quickly. October is not that far, amazingly. Where did summer go, Matt? Where? Matt
Some
does not know.
no, well, some folks get to have that summer until after Labor Day, but not in our region.
No, no. People have been in school since like July in Atlanta. It's kind of insane. We kind of just skip summer entirely. All right, we're gonna have I think we're starting to hit a plateau. So we'll start shifting from pleasantries to the actual webinar. We have an hour tonight to talk to you about the digital PSAT. It's coming, and we want to answer a lot of questions tonight. I'm here. Dr. Jed Applerouth, founder of Applerouth Tutoring Service, is here with my esteemed colleague, Matt Kiesner. Matt and I have worked together for over 10 years, going on more than that.
At least 12.
At least 12. And Matt is an expert tutor and a head of our curriculum team, instructional designer. He writes our books. He studies the PSAT. He understands it like nobody else in the shop. He's here to help answer questions. He understands the nuance of this way better than most human beings do. So we're happy to have Matt here. Happy to be here myself. And I feel like now it's time to jump in. So we're going to have the structure tonight. We're going to record this. We're going to send you a link to the recording. You'll be able to watch it, fast forward, share it, play it, and so forth. We're going to have, hopefully, we'll answer a lot of your questions in the next 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have an open Q&A session. But our goal is to do a lot of front loading, answer a lot of the questions, and hopefully be fairly exhaustive about all the things you might want to ask about this forthcoming digital PSAT coming in October. All right, so let's jump right in. Let's begin. First, before we take off in terms of the digital PSAT, who we are. Some of you are new to Applerouth. One of the core principles of Applerouth, we started in 2001, was that if you can help students change their beliefs about themselves, their abilities, you can change their outcomes and then change their lives. Been doing that for thousands of kids for several decades. And the three things that we do: academic tutoring, test preparation, which is tonight's focus, and we also coach kids on executive functioning, helping them become better with their resources. And so these are our three pillars of the company. There is a question. Will you send a presentation in case I can't listen? Yes, we're going to send you a durable recording. That'll be there. You can watch it, replay it at your pleasure later on. All right, let us then jump in. Tonight's topic, first off, is what is this digital PSAT? Talk about it, the format, structure. Second, how do I do well? We marketed this to a lot of students, so we have a lot of students in the audience trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I prep? How do I think about these kind of questions? Then preparation. What does prep look like? What are the best resources? How many practice tests and so forth? Then we'll talk about, the test day. How do I get ready for success on that test day coming up? Then we'll mention national merit. It's a fairly small number of kids for whom that's highly relevant, but it's definitely part of the conversation. And finally, how does the PSAT fit in my college application process? So that really is the sum of tonight's discussion. Now, first and foremost, what is this digital PSAT? So every October for decades, they've administered the PSAT. I took it, Matt took it, to give parents and kids a sense of how they're going to do on the full-scale SAT. It really is a practice SAT. It has been for years. The digital PSAT this year, it's for the first time in history of the test, is going to be on a computer, not on paper, and no more Scantrons. That's a massive change. That's going to go along with the forthcoming March SAT, because paper is going away on the SAT. That's a radical change after 90 plus years, but it's finally here, and it's actually overdue. It's going to make the test a better test. We'll talk about that. And additionally, this PSAT has been used by, there's a National Merit Scholarship Corporation, and they give national merit scholarships out, which have a $2,500 value, a certain number of students every year. And they use the PSAT to identify the top candidates who they believe merit this award. So it can also be used to parlay into scholarships from this organization, and then also scholarships given at colleges. So, but that's for a sliver, there are 10,000 kids or so actually get the award. So we'll talk about that. All right, the structure and of the PSAT, it's going to start, there's a question from John, in October. And October 2nd through 31st, there's a range of dates. Hopefully it's not Halloween, but which is very different. Historically, it was on like October 13th, and every kid in the country took it on the exact same day. That goes away. It's one of the reasons why when you have your own device, they can have, let's say a school is working with, a rural place or a, low-income inner city school. They only have 45 laptops or Chromebooks or tablets, and their students don't have them. They can still use those over a series of days. And because every single digital test is a different test, like my number 12, the answer is D. Your number 12, the answer is C, and it's vice versa. And so kids can't go in the hall and share answers. That doesn't work anymore. They can give these tests 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times and it won't be compromised. And so schools who are limited in their resources can still give it over 10 days or 12 days, whatever they want. They can do 3 classes every day until everyone in the school has done it. So that's why we have the whole month, not just one day. So it's coming in October, and it'll vary based on your school's calendar. When they might do sophomores on this day and juniors on this day and freshmen on this day and so forth. The structure of this new digital test, it's as follows. You have 2 32-minute modules, and they're, the first one is a baseline. Everyone gets a similar test. Then after that, you get your adapted module, either easier or harder. We have that first for reading and writing, 10-minute break, and then math, 35 minutes for the baseline, and then the adapted, either easier or harder. And that's it. So we have 134 minutes. That is it. 2 hours and 14 minutes of test time and 10 minutes of a break. And that's it. This thing is a short test. It's shorter than ever before. And that's one of the reasons why we believe students are going to like this test a lot. And there's been great feedback from the 4 international administrations of the SAT we've seen since March so far. We had March, May, June, and now August, which was last weekend. So number of questions, 98 questions, and that's it. It's short, it's sweet, to the point, and you're done. There are 2 questions that are they're pre-test questions, which are experimental, which are going to be in each section. So that's a grand total of 2 times 4 sections. There are 8 questions on this test, which are experimental, which are going to be used to establish levels of difficulty. Are they easy, medium, or hard questions? Make sure there's no bias by gender, by demography, by ethnicity, and so forth. So those questions won't count, but you'll never know which ones they are, so it's not even worth worrying about them. All right, moving on. For any of you who had the PSAT last year, if you're a junior, when you're a sophomore, if you're a sophomore, some schools as a freshman do it, note the difference in number of items. This is really a big deal. So on the verbal section, that's going to be reading and writing. On the old PSAT, last year's and the year before, there were 91 questions to figure out how many, to establish your score. 91 questions on verbal. Now there are 54 questions. That is a big drop. So the beauty of an adaptive test is, by its very nature, it's much more efficient. So for a student who's going for the really high score, I'm not going to ask you all the easy questions. And for a student going for a lower score, I'm not going to also waste your time with the super hard questions. I can get there more efficiently, more expediently, and that's one of the beauties of adaptive testing. It's a shorter test, fewer items. Everyone likes that, who I've talked to so far. So the nature of this thing, I mentioned before, both verbal, there's a baseline, and then an adaptive section. And then for math also, there's a baseline. And so every student gets a similar, baseline test, similar number of easy, medium, hard questions. But then if I do over a certain threshold, I go to the harder adaptive module. If I do under, I'm going to the easier. And that's it. So as we understand it right now, there are just 2 forms of adaptation, easy or hard. We have heard some College Board reps mention that there may be a third, there may be an easy, intermediate, hard. But all that we've seen so far on the Blue Book app, which is the one that's available for students to take and practice, all they have it's bifurcated, easy or hard. That's it. But if they want to, they could add more levels or more layers. It really wouldn't change your experience at all. But right now, so far, what we've seen is just 2 levels, easier or harder. All right, and I'll go more into detail on that after Matt talks about strategies. So when it comes down to, did I make the more advanced module? Here's the thing. The PSAT is not going to tell you. The College Board will never tell you if you went to the hard module or the easy module. And on the score report, it's not going to tell you if you went to the easy or hard. The only way that we know so far, we did some analysis of the 4 Blue Book tests that are available and that are made public. And it seems like, it's going to be around a 650, 660 or above. That is the cut score that we found on the first 4 practice tests. So if, there is a slight difference, though, that's for the SAT, which is out of 800. So the PSAT, that number might be somewhere below that, 620, thereabouts. We don't have that number just yet. And so, but essentially, if you're going to be scoring, the top score is going to be a 1520, on the PSAT. If you're scoring in the 1400s, you made the more advanced module. And also, there's a minimal threshold. If you're scoring like below, it's like, somewhere in the 900s. Below that, you went to the lower module. But if you're somewhere in the middle, you can't tell. If you're at 1100, who knows? You may have gotten to the easy module and crushed it, or the harder one and not done as well. But you really can't tell. Also, 1100, 1200. So they're not going to ever tell you. You can't back it out unless you're over a certain threshold or below a certain threshold. But essentially, know that so worrying about, am I easy or hard? Don't spend too much energy mentally trying to figure it out. Don't, you'd be tempted, but there's no way to solve it. Because again, the easy and the hard module both contain a mix of easy, medium, and hard questions. Although the harder module does have more advanced questions than the easier module. I'll show you that later on. All right. And there's also a piece here. We mentioned different questions at different weights. I'll talk more about that, which is a massive departure from history. For forever and ever, every single item counted the same. One question was 1 raw point scaled to 1 scaled point. Not anymore. That different items had different weights, but again, they never tell you. And that's part of the way they got more efficient. They found out, doing some pretesting, that hey, if kids who tend to get this question right, question 13, also almost always get questions 14, 15, 16. So rather than ask you all 4 of those questions, which are similar and highly correlated, why don't I want to just weight question 13 more heavily? And therefore I can get at the answer more quickly with fewer items. And then that's a better experience for students. So that is a change, that different items, which, have a broader, like if you really know algebra, you'll get this question right. That'll be weighted a little more heavily from all their pretesting. All right, the scoring for the digital PSAT, it's going to be, again, every section is going to be the verbal, your max is a 760, and math, max 760. So there are 40 points of verbal withheld and 40 points of math withheld. And there are certain things like the most advanced science reading won't appear on this test. The hardest, like circles and some of the more advanced, functions, won't appear on the PSAT. They'll only appear on the full scale SAT. That's why there's an 80-point differential. However, structurally, this test is going to be identical to the SAT, identical in number of items and in timing. So the content is slightly harder on the SAT, but these tests look the same on their face. Same structure, same timing, and so forth, which is new. It was always a shorter version. Now it's the exact same version with a little bit of harder content mixed in. National merit for those few of you who are going to be in that space, which again is 1% of the population, and it varies by state. The national cut scores are established by they double verbal, and then they add math. Then they divide by 10. And so that's going to give you a score, which is the top score of that is a 228. And so the cut scores by state, they're going to vary. Like some of the top regions, like New York, California, they were always 223, 24. And states that were less competitive, it could be 208, 209. That'll vary by state. It's at the top couple percent of students in each state. So that's going to be consistent. We don't expect that to change very much because they've done a lot of correlating. There was a 5,500 person study, a pilot, trying to determine the calibration of the digital SAT to the paper-based SAT. And it was pretty basic, where they gave students a paper-based SAT, and 2 weeks later, within 2 weeks, they gave them a digital SAT, and they were able to get this thing calibrated within like about 10 points. So there's not any real change. between the paper. And so, that's why we don't expect these scores on national merit to change very much because of that level of correlating of paper and digital tests. All right, the administration. It's very simple. There's an app called the College Board. It's the Blue Book app. And if you want to find it, you can go online right now, Google Blue Book app, College Board, boom. And that is the very app you'll be using to take the official PSAT and the official SAT. So there really is no mystery. Like, what's it like? You can go look at it right now or after this webinar is over. And you're going to download this onto your own device, your own laptop, your own tablet. And if you're needing one from a school, the schools can use theirs. You can also request one from the College Board. And this application, when you install it, it locks down your computer. Nothing else is going to be able to open up or access. You can't go online, you can't search. It's all locking down your whole system. And then in advance of the test day, you're going to download the actual test. It's going to be encrypted and locked in place. When you go to the test center on test day, they're going to give you a code. You enter the code, encryption's open. Now you can actually, take your test. So, which is really great if there's no big Wi-Fi demand on test day. All you have to do, because everything will be preloaded. And that means that on that test, you're going to have the baseline module and both the adaptive easy and hard for verbal, and the same thing for math. So everything is downloaded before. And so all you're doing is opening it up. And so during the test, it's not you aren't going to the cloud to figure out, do I go easy or hard? It's all right there on your laptop, saved onto your hard drive. Okay. Now, taking the PSAT, everything happens in the Blue Book app. You have a timer right there on the top. You could hide it or keep it up there at 5 minutes. It blinks. The proctor has a tablet, and if there is Wi-Fi in the room, they have their proctoring app, which actually lets them see every single student in the classroom and what number they're on, how they're doing, if they're having any issues. So before you have an issue, the proctor will see, Jennifer in seat this, is stuck on question 2. And the proctor might come and ask you, are things okay, even before you raise a hand. But if there are any issues, there'll be a proctor there. There is a built-in calculator called Desmos, which Matt will talk about at length, but you also can bring your own calculator. And we found that a lot of our students, like having both. Sometimes Desmos is amazing for graphing. Other ones are better for calculating. And you also are going to have scratch paper. So they're going to give you 3 sheets. If you run out, you raise your hand. And additionally, there are going to be accommodations given to students if they have disabilities. And they're going to be administered and integrated into the Blue Book. And there is also the possibility of a longer paper test. We haven't heard much about that, but that was announced earlier. And I'll cover a couple slides about that later on. All right, we have a comprehensive, lot of heavy text slide here, Matt's laughing. But I wanted to be exhaustive because, again, these are the questions I've come across over the past 8 times giving this talk over the, and kids want to know what happens, like, how's it work? And again, you download the test in advance. When you go in there, you're just entering the code, unlocking it, very simple. So, and the Wi-Fi needs you have are to enter the code unencrypted. And then you also need Wi-Fi at the very, very end to upload your file with your answers, which is a little tiny text file. Upload it, you're done, you're finished. So you need Wi-Fi for all of 2 seconds, and that's it. If your machine freezes, it's happened a couple times. Everything you're doing, let's say you're on the baseline verbal, you're in question 13, and you're about to answer and it freezes. Doesn't happen very often, almost never. But what happens is it's going to stay, you have 15 minutes left in the test, and you're stuck. So you restart everything, you press restart, open up again. It's going to open it up back exactly to the timestamp where you were before. So you've already answered these 7 or these questions. They're logged in. You're at 15:25. That's frozen. Then you're back. So that's way better for the digital ACT. Sometimes they was relying upon Wi-Fi and things crashed and they lost everything. Also on the early AP exam, not going to happen. That's not what everything is saving onto your hard drive. And everything is timestamped, which is really brilliant. So, and a few kids had their test froze out of the hundreds of students we've talked to, work with, but really this thing is pretty darn durable and not glitchy. They've worked out most of any issues. Now they're going to ask you to make sure your laptop is charged up. If you have power issues, there's going to be a room dedicated for support for tech and IT, and there'll be someone there to help you. If you have extra time and a half, double time, which will be administered all in the same day with this short little test, they're going to give you a power cord to make sure you don't run out of power. And in Chromebooks, there's a little catch. are acceptable only if they're given out by the school and they install a Blue Book app. Somehow, I don't know how Chromebook is different, but that was one little caveat they put in there. All right. And now I'm going to hand it over for the next 20 slides to Matt.
Yeah, we'll see how fast we can get through these. Yeah, thanks, Jed. So what we're going to talk about is get into some of the details about the specific sections and the types of questions you'll encounter, and get into some strategies. So we're going to start with the reading writing section, as that is the first part of the test. And one thing about the reading writing section is that the questions are very predictable in that there's the structure that they go through. So every question is going to be is going to have its own text, its own passage, and you're reading a small passage and then answering one question, and then the next question will be a new passage. So it starts with craft and structure. That's going to be words and context, which is vocabulary, and testing. You're basically, there's a blank in the passage, and you're putting it in the most accurate word. Text structure and purpose is going to be what is the sentence doing to further the claim or the idea, or what is the overall structure of the passage. Cross text connections is going to just be a comparison to two paragraphs, and there'll only be one of those per test. Then we move into information ideas. The central ideas and details is the classic reading comprehension questions. And that's going to be questions on what's the main idea of the passage, or what's the detail we can get from it. Command evidence is new, a new kind of question that's about you read a passage and makes a claim, and then the answers are evidence for or against that claim. And then inference is kind of similar, where it's you read the passage, and then the question asks you to basically finish the passage, and what is the logical conclusion. Then it's going to transfer into standard English conventions. This is all in the same module. Previously, there have been reading sections and writing sections, and they were weighted equally. There are definitely far fewer grammar questions than there were preceding. So boundaries is your commas, clauses, punctuation, that kind of stuff. Form, structure, sense is verbs, pronouns, misplaced modifiers, that kind of thing. And then it's going to end with expressive ideas. Transitions are just do you want to use however or furthermore? And then rhetorical synthesis are where you're trying to answer questions, synthesize it. I've got a slide that will show that. It'll make more sense. All right, thank you, Jed. So the reading strategy is you really should read the question first to determine what you're focusing on. Every text is one question, so you really want to just focus on what it's asking. Then read the text with that question in mind, so knowing what your task will be. And then most of the time, eliminating wrong answers is going to be the best solution for that. So to give a kind of a overview of what this is what the Blue Book app looks like. So a couple things on here. So this is obviously one of these questions is going to be from the standard English conventions. So there is an annotate tool up here in the upper right, and you can highlight text and then click annotate, and then it'll make a color of your choice, yellow, green, whatever. And then you also can write down a note if you want. There's the timer, and you can hide it, and that's in the center. And then I think one of the best things over here, it's kind of hidden in this weird symbol, but that's called the answer eliminator tool. And so I would click that on the first question, and it allows you to block out answers if you know that if you don't like D, it'll basically cross D out as an answer choice, and so it'll help you kind of eliminate answers. If you want to move around, you can push down to the bottom here, and so you can move around the section, because it is section adaptive. It's not question adaptive, where once you answer question one, you cannot answer. You can't go back to question one, because question two is based on your answer for question one. And then there's also a mark for review. So if you're not sure about the answer to this, you can go in and do that again. You can go back to that question as long as you have that time in that section. All right, so we're going to look at some of the not all the question types, but some of the, I guess, the more interesting ones, and talk a little about strategy for those. So we'll start with words and context. These are always the first questions. They're going to go easy to hard. And one thing about it is that, like, the passage is going to be, 1 or 2 sentences. And if you look at like just the answer choices here, variety, limitations, precisions, obscurity, none of these are like really challenging words, and like, they're not like pulled up from the depths of Victorian literature. They actually did a study. They digitized a bunch of college textbooks. They got rid of like what they call level 1 words, or just thes and ands and things like that. And then they also got rid of like any words that were like very specific to a certain kind of discipline, right? That they jargony kind of stuff. And they kind of looked at like, after you get rid of like the most basic vocabulary, and then get rid of things that you only need if you're going to study biology or whatever, and they kind of focused on that. So what you want to do is look for the logic of this. Here that we see it, that the author was frustrated, and so you would be frustrated with probably either limitation of obscurity, but if it's a term, you can make a obscure term relevant, but this author coined a new term, so then it would have to be limitations, because they're saying that there wasn't a term on there. Next one here is command of evidence. So we see a couple things that are new on this test. So like this one is where there's a claim. It says that in this poem, the speaker compares changes to the seasons to the attitude of his beloved, and so there's a comparison. And then if you look at the answer choices, they are lines from the poem. And so what's wild about this is that you don't get to read Thomas Carey's The Spring, but you have to use the context in there to figure out which one supports that claim. And so you'd want to go through and make and find the answer that makes sense. It makes that comparison there. So inference questions, these always say which choice most logically completes the text. And it's going to be the end of the sentence. And so you want to go through and look at and try to understand the claims and the logic of there. So things that would be important, if like focus on, transition words. If it says however, that shows that there's a difference in idea. And that, as they have initial tests, and they've been positive, and the research continues. What would be the next step, like for these things? All right, and then here's the rhetorical synthesis. These ones are like the weirdest new questions. They're always at the end of each module, and so they're easy to identify because they always have a bulleted list as the text. And what we found is actually a really great strategy is that the questions always asking something very specific. And so here they want to introduce the research of these folks with an audience already familiar with global warming. And so what we found on this one, in this question specifically, you can actually just go right to the answer choices and see which one makes sense to this, the answers to this question. And you may be able to get down to that question, the answer, because there's only one that really does that task. If you are uncertain, you can definitely read the list, but the list is going to have more information than you need. So it actually is kind of a time saver, and I think saves your brain to just kind of focus on the question and the answers. Again, only on this one specific rhetorical synthesis question. Obviously, the other ones you got to read the passage. All right, so let's talk about some math. So both math modules are going to go easy to hard. That most of the questions are going to be multiple choice, but there are going to be some student-produced responses. And the previous test had it where it was its own section at the end. Now they're kind of integrated in. So you'll know it because you click on that question and there is no A, B, C, D. There'll be a blank, and you can enter in whole numbers, fractions, decimals, and they do allow negatives now, which previously they did not. There's going to be you can use the Desmos calculator on every question. Previously, PSAT had a no calculator section, and so you can use calculator on every question. And again, as Jed mentioned earlier, you're going to have your own scratch paper. So if like writing down your work especially on algebra, is a great idea, and you should definitely continue with that on math section. So you won't have to do any kind of like worry about keeping too much stuff in your head. So the math topics are it's going to be mostly on algebra, and it is kind of focusing on what they call the algebra 2 suite. I'm I recognize that certain schools are gonna have different names for that. But that's gonna be everything from linear equations to quadratics to more advanced graphing with higher powers and understanding how to manipulate polynomial equations. There's also going to be some data representation, so that's going to be some basic statistics. There'll also be a little bit of geometry and maybe 1 or 2 trigonometry questions sort of there. So on the blue book does look different on the math, and so we want to include this one. As you say, the calculator is like, if you hit that, it will pull up Desmos. The reference is only geometry reference, but if you were trying to remember like the area of a triangle, it's there. You just need to click on that. One thing that is different is that there is no annotate tool on the math section, which for a word problem I can see wanting to annotate and highlight the specific terms, but unfortunately that's a limitation of the Blue Book app at this point on there. All right, so one thing that's different is that there is a lot less reading on the math. They took some criticism that's saying that a math question might be throwing in like kind of a unusual a circumstance where you're reading about Chad is buying cantaloupes for the cotillion, and none of that really matters in terms of the actual math. And so now it's like they've really stripped it down to like clearly stated problems and nothing that would be like kind of culturally specific on there. And so far fewer word problems, far fewer words per problem, a lot more pure math on this test. They've really made a strong divide that the reading section is about reading, and there was no math in the reading section, and a graph can show up in the reading section, but they won't even ask you to like find the difference between 2 numbers, which would just be subtraction. And the math section is not going to be about your ability to synthesize a paragraph in order to get a math idea out. So let's get some math strategies. So first off, you read the question to determine the goal. Like, what are they trying to solve for? Then the next thing is like planning your attack. What do you need to do? Do you want to pull up Desmos and throw the equation or equations into Desmos and see what they look like? That might be the best story. Maybe you need to create an equation. Maybe you need to create a variable. Obviously there's going to be some variance in there. And then once you've kind of set up your attack and kind of your first plan, then you want to compute. And don't skip steps. This test will definitely punish you if you are lazy with algebra. And if you're thinking of this test from how the person writing it is from there, like you need to distribute a negative across the parenthesis. They know this that some students are going to forget to do that to all terms. So like that will be one of the wrong answers, right? The wrong answers are common mistakes for things that are also true. And then one of the most important things is double check that you answered the question asked. You might come up with like you found the value of X and you're correct, but they want the value of Y. You came up with the area of the rectangle, they wanted the perimeter, those kind of things. So definitely double check. And definitely know how to use Desmos. The great thing about Desmos is that it's free online. You can go to desmos.com. You can play with it tonight. And it is a very nice graphing calculator. We may be all familiar with kind of the TI-80 series. Desmos has color. It does shading. It is very fast. And you can work through things very quickly. And also you like one of the limitations on like a TI-84 is that it is set up to you want it's up in function notation where it's y equals, but on Desmos you can put it if you do like 6x minus 3y equals 10, you can just put it in that form and it will graph that linear relationship. So let's I'll go through a couple of questions and then see how we can use Desmos. So we got a classic system of equations question, and can you solve this using algebra? Absolutely. On there you can it'll definitely work. But you can just type in these equations into Desmos and visually see it, which next slide will do. Boom. So you type them in, and then where they touch is the solution on there. And so it asks for the y, and so then make sure that you pick, because this is going to be our xy thing here. So make sure you pick 3, right, and don't pick 5. Which is again is that double checking that you answer the question asked. Now again, can you use the algebra, do substitution or elimination? Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that, but Desmos I think is faster. So we can work with quadratics. Here we got a function. There's a quadratic, and so since the function above has zeros of points a and b on x-coordinate plane, what is the distance of line segment AB? Now you could factor this normally and do that, but you can definitely roll with this on there. So you plug it into Desmos. Then you can just literally click on when you click on these points, it will tell you the values of it. So you got -3.5 and 3, and so then it's asking for the distance between these two, and so our answer would be 6.5 on there. So again, make sure you know what you're solving for. And then, as you can clearly see, this is we're doing a little more advanced math. We're dealing with rational expressions on here. Again, you can do this the algebra way. It is valid. You would create a common denominator by multiplying x plus 4 times 3x minus plus 1, and then changing the tops. Totally works. Very completely doable. But there's a different way. So what you do on here, and apologize for the kind of difficulty of seeing this, is that in the gray is the original expression on all of these, and so you can rational expressions are going to look kind of weird. They're going to have asymptotes and stuff, but you can put that one in there, and then you just try each of the answer choices. And so A, B, and C do not match. C is close, but it's not a match. But D, it lays completely over. And so all you do is type all those gross rational expressions into Desmos. And when you find the one that it looks identical, that's your answer. So that Desmos can really save you a lot of time and a lot of energy and circumvent a lot of algebra. Jed, you ready to jump in there?
Ready.
All right.
I'm ready. Desmos is amazing, and if you haven't realized it by now, I mean, it's a game changer. Just like, when you're practicing on the Blue Book, working with Desmos, it's a different experience of testing. And once you're masterful with Desmos, it's going to be, I don't know, it's a big deal. So learning that is a major piece of rocking out on math. So in terms of adaptive testing, there's a slide I want to talk to you about. I think it's really quite relevant and quite important for understanding timing and pacing, and that'll help you in terms of strategy. So there is a very substantial level of difficulty difference between the easy and hard module as we've seen them on the Blue Book app. So here's the shift. I'll show you how this looks. All right, so the baseline module looks like this, okay? Let me help you with the graph. So module 1, you're going to have 2 level 1 questions, 2 that are very easy. You're going to have about 10 level 2. So the test skews a little bit towards the easier side. You're going to have 7 level 3 and 3 level 4. So we have a peak at level 2, then it goes down, okay? If you are routed to the easier section, so if you get fewer than about 2/3 right, you're going to the easier module. You miss over a third of the items, you're going easier by the current, Blue Book questions. So here, see how it skews. Level 1 went from 2 questions up to 7. Now they're asking you a lot more easy questions. Level 2 went from 10 to about 9, but the same. Level 3 dropped from 7 down to 5, and level 4 dropped from 3 down to 1. So there's still a mix of easy, medium, and hard questions, but we're skewing toward the easier side. Now compare that easy module to the hard module. These are quite different. So level 1 goes from 7 easy questions down to 1. It goes from 9 level 2 questions, so easy, not as easy, down to 4. Level 3 pops from 5 questions up to 12, and the hardest question types go from 1 up to 5. So you can see how different these are if I get routed to the easy or hard module. And this matters when it comes to pacing. We've gotten feedback from many students all over the globe who've taken the international SAT, and we've heard you have to be a little careful on pacing. If you're getting into a zone, kind of a comfortable zone on the baseline module in terms of timing and pacing, really weren't in a rush, doing fine. But then you get routed to the harder module, you've got to up your game a little bit, because now you're not dealing with 10 level 2 questions, you're dealing with 12 level 3, and you're dealing with 5 level 4. So we have harder questions. So you have to be ready to modulate up and increase your speed and pace if you are routed to that harder module. That's the importance of understanding that these are very different looking, the shapes of the easy and hard sections. Now we, as Matt mentioned, there is a function on the bottom. It is called, like flag for review. At the very bottom, you can click on this. Where are you in the test? And it pulls open this thing, which I think it blew me away. It shows you exactly where you are in the test. You're on number 10, little dot there, and you realize, oh, I didn't answer number 4, and answer 4 isn't filled in. It's very clear. This is so many kids over the years, they've either missed, on the Scantron, they missed one. They began to miss gridding, never again. And if you skipped one, you get, oh, I missed number 4. It's very clean, very easy. Also, if you aren't sure about number 6, you can answer it, but then flag it for review later. And then at the end of your test, if you have like 3 minutes left, I can go back and toggle quickly between the 3 or 4 questions that I wasn't sure about. And if I hadn't guessed then, I can just guess bam, 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 ABC, whatever it is, and I'm done. So this is versus kids flipping around, trying to find ones they've circled. This is so much more efficient and so much smarter. So kids definitely liked using this feature. Mark for review and the answer eliminator were 2 of the biggest features that were used by our students. I mentioned briefly earlier that different items have different weights. They've done all this pre-testing, and if you get this one right, you're going to probably get these 3 right. Therefore, let's just weight this one more heavily and omit the other 2 items. So you're not going to know which ones are weighted more heavily, but that is part of the structure of this test. And so, but here's the key. You're not going to know which ones are experimental. You're not going to know which ones are weighted more heavily, and you're not going to know whether you're in the easy or hard section. So the name of the game is keep your focus on the item in front of you, and that's it. Don't get distracted of working on the test, work in the test, in that item. That really is clutch and key. And I mentioned before that, the student next to you will be taking a test, and you're on number 5, which is not the same as her number 5. And the answer for your number 5 is different than her answer. And so that makes cheating a lot harder. That's why they can administer the test 7 times in a row, because there's not one, 12 is, B, 13 is C. That will never exist again on digital testing. So everyone's taking a different test. And I'm going to hand it up back to Matt. How to prep.
Yeah. So let's figure out how to do this prep test. I see some kind of questions here in the Q&A, and I'll have some answers for that. All right. So I think one of the best things to do is to take a practice test and to learn the format and the question types on there. There's some options for that. There is a practice PSC on Blue Book. We'll also talk about some options that Applerouth has on there. And that, like, in terms of things like the Khan Academy, someone asked about that. They do, like, they have adjusted to this digital PSAT. The main thing is you want to make sure that you're prepping for the digital PSAT and not using resources from multiple prior years. Looking at last year's PSAT is not going to be helpful for this test. And as Jed was just saying, you're focused on the question in front of you. I would not recommend trying to like outsmart the test, because it's algorithmic thinking, and it's not that just that they have different weights. It means that it's like questions have different, like there are different metrics that they think about in turn. Like it's not just one weight. It's not like one is worth 10 points, one's worth 1 point. It's that they're looking at things like guessability of or in terms of like what knowledge would you need, like how much background knowledge would you need to understand this. And so as someone who's been staring at this stuff for a while now, I find it pretty overwhelming, analytically. And I think as a test taker, it's trying to outsmart this is a terrible use of the limits of our working memory. And then obviously you get familiar with that Desmos and learn the tricks of Desmos. I only showed you a few things, but there's definitely more that you can play around. That you can make tables, you can use sliders. There's all kinds of neat stuff to do. So the week before the test, make sure that you've downloaded Blue Book on your testing device. I have started researching on schools, and obviously we have quite a few people here, and we don't know exactly different schools. But if you have a school device that is your laptop that the school has provided, that's almost certainly what you're going to test on versus like a personal device. But make sure you get that that downloaded and get that update before the test. Like you're basically pre-downloading the test. Then you want to start getting into a good habit on that, and make sure you know when you're taking the test, because again, different schools have different dates set up. Quite a few of them already have it on the calendar, on there. It'll be sometime in October, and then obviously the night before, charge your device all the way. Don't like don't assume that I have good battery life. That I think is it's one of the biggest mistakes you could make, and it's just going to add stress, right? You're looking at how much power you have left. All right, so morning of the test, if you're bringing your device, if you're not using one from the school, make sure you have your device and have the charger, just in case. Bring a calculator if you want. Pack a snack for the break. Protein is a good good kind of snack, and definitely have a good protein-rich breakfast. This is not a day to skip breakfast. If you do any kind of athletic training, play sports, or I'm working with the kid right now who does competitive gaming and stuff. Like the things that you do for those activities, you should that same behavior you should apply to the PSAT. And then during the test, you'll be given a code, and then you'll have your own test form. Wandering eyes aren't going to do much on this test. And then again, focus on the question, answer the question in front of you. Don't worry about all of the big pictures. This metadata is not it's not helpful. And if you get stressed, and that can happen, the best thing to do is to be calm, pause, close your eyes, take a deep breath, recenter. It's just one question on there, rather than try to push through and try to rush. You're more likely to create more anxiety that actually affects our working memory. So when we get our scores, one thing, don't worry, the test will not grade you as you sit there. I know that is a fear. There are some graduate school tests that will do that for adults. I think everyone feels terrible on that. So don't worry, you're not going to sit there and then you're not going to get your score while you're there. They are going to take those scores, and there's going to be some, they are going to play with the averages and the and see how things do, because quite honestly, you don't know, like that question, its weight can actually change depending on how many other students answered that question or a similar question on there. But they are coming back faster, so they're going to be released in batches in November. If you take the PSAT in the first half of October, you'll get it in early November, and if you take it in the second half of October, you'll get it in mid-November, so everyone will have it before Thanksgiving. And don't expect much on this on the score feedback. So this is a real feedback from a student who took the digital SAT abroad. And so the student got a 630 reading and writing, and the 4 categories we had talked about were all broken into this bar of 7. And the 7 bar could be 12 to 14 questions, and this one is 13 to 15 questions. And then on the math here, you get into like geometry and trig. It's 5 to 7 questions of 7 bars. So missed one, is that, I'm assuming that would probably mean you missed 1 question. It's hard to tell, right? Then problem solve data analysis, right? If you missed, you got 4 out of 7, and then it's 5 to 7 questions. I mean, we don't even know how many questions that means, right? Did that mean this missed 2 questions out of 5, or it is very minimal. So they're not going to tell you how many questions you got right or wrong. The reason they're doing this is because with that item response scoring, there is going to be that kid who misses 1 question and loses 30 or 40 points off their score, right? And that and I think they're doing a preemptive strike to not have to justify this more algorithmic scoring to upset families. And then sorry, one last thing, but we did like this student got 610 on math. Do we know which module? I think that is well in that gray zone of we don't know if that student got to the upper or lower module. Okay. Thanks, Jed. That's you, bud.
So for accommodations, I'm getting to the end of our time. I'll be brief. They are going to allow students to have digital accommodations, and for the majority, 3/4 of kids, that's extra time. and all you're going to do is enter a code, your SSD code, and boom, the machine gives you extra time and a half, double time, whatever it is, extra breaks. So the codes, there's no more relying upon a proctor. There's also capability of text to speech. Kids who have issues with, reading issues, I bring my own headphone, and I can fast forward, I can play it again. It's very, very effective. And Desmos, having a calculator for all sections was an accommodation. Now it's built in, everyone gets it. So this is really good for kids with disabilities. It's a very much a step forward for students. There is a paper-based test, which is a longer test. And the quote is, if a student is unable to test with a digital test, they should contact us and request a paper test. We haven't heard much more than that, although we have the format of it and so forth. But we don't, and there actually are several of them available on College Board's app, but we haven't heard much from schools about this or kids taking this or getting their accommodations approved for this. But also it's a longer test, and a lot of kids aren't going to like a longer test because part of the beauty of this is it's short and sweet and efficient.
And you lose Desmos.
And you lose Desmos, which is very powerful. So we're not going to see many takers trying to game it because it's more items and you lose this great resource. So feedback, we've had 4 tests so far, over 100,000 students around the globe. And honestly, the feedback has been almost universally positive. Kids like this test all over the world. A few issues, the kids who had issues, some of them was entering their code at the beginning or a couple freezes out of hundreds of students that we talked to. But, it's the vast majority, it was flawless. And we've heard again, watch your pacing, because again, if you go from baseline to hard, you have more hard items. So make sure you adapt and modulate up your pacing. And then everyone says Desmos fluency matters. If you haven't practiced on Desmos, stop what you're doing, put some time into it, learn it. Some of you already use it in school. It's one of the major school-based calculators in the country, which is really cool. They're able to license it for this. It's one of the very top shelf calculators available for students. But if you haven't ever used it before, get comfortable, spend a little time with it, learn it. And again, preferences. The data from the 5,500 person pilot, again, these are kids who took within 2 weeks apart, the paper and digital within 2 weeks. 8 out of 10 said, I like the computer one better. That's the big deal. It was recent in memory, it was fresh. And they said, this is a better testing experience. We've heard the same thing from students all over the country, all over the globe, rather. So as well as the pilots here in the US. And administrators love it. No more Scantrons, no more matching Scantrons with test booklets, no more collecting. The kids take it, they upload it, they walk out where they're finished. It's so efficient. Also, you save time on the admin side. Kids are going to be entering their data at home. So you aren't spending all this time entering the Scantron, my name, my birth date, my social, that's already inputted. So you're saving time on the administration and also the data entry on the front and the back end. So it's more than an hour you're shaving off. This is really a better test for everybody. So it's shorter test, less cognitive endurance, less about how long can I focus, short passages, less working memory focus, less skimming. You have more time per question, so less about speed. Calculator is always there, and you get results back faster. There are a lot of reasons why kids like this better. The timeline is coming, so October, 8th, 9th, and 11th grade kids are taking the digital PSAT, scores back before Thanksgiving, starting early November. And then December is the last time there's going to be a paper SAT on a national test day, apart from accommodations in the country. Then March, everyone's taking the digital SAT, and there's no going back. The same thing like with the LSAT or the GMAT. For 27 years, they've been taking these things on computers since 97, 98, 25 years plus. And so this is where it's all going. And the ACT is sure to follow. It's a matter of when. But paper is a liability. Paper is less secure. And computer, especially computer adapted, you have all these benefits. So your options, Matt, go ahead and take it away, the final piece.
Yeah. So if you're testing options, so if it says rising junior or your current junior, right? Because I know that probably quite a few of you are already in school. So you can use the PSCs for to practice for the digital SAT. The PSC does not count for college on there. So you could, if you like the PSAT from last year or any kind of SAT practice, you still can take the paper-based SAT, but you have to finish by December, which means honestly that you should be starting your preparation now. and that is only if you're a junior, that you can take that. And then, if you've taken the, you compare your PSA scores to a ACT. The ACT is still an option, and is not having any kind of revamp this year, and to see which one makes the most sense for you. So we have been working on this a lot. This is we have a Applerouth Digital SAT and PSAT test. They're similar. I would only do one. And so we have that available for students, and it does offer a lot of in-depth analysis that we're not going to just give you 7 bars and have you try to figure it out. And so you can understand a better study plan. And then we have a second one coming out very soon. I was proofreading the math section on our testing platform this afternoon. So we're real close. It might be it might be out next week. So hopefully that'll be. I just don't have the exact date on there. You want to say the good stuff there, Jed?
All you, man. You got this.
That's all me. Okay. Yeah. So as we said earlier, we love to figure out what makes your student unique. And there's things we do: academic tutoring, test prep, and executive function coaching. And we got a couple of PSAT related things here in a second. So we're going to be doing a PSAT prep rally. The sign up starts tomorrow, and so that's going to include a practice test and some webinars that are going to go. There's going to be ones for the reading and writing, and ones for the math. And to kind of go over those strategies, and we'll be rolling those out from September 23rd to October 7th at different times and dates. So you can go to applerouth.com / prep rally. My brain went pre rally on there, and then I wanted to say for I think a kind of a thing that we do that's been something that I've really enjoyed is that we do offer some. Do you want to go to the next slide? Yeah. So we are running these PSC Masterclass and PSC Foundation classes. So these are paid classes. They're 3-hour boot camps of I think they're $199 on there. And the masterclass is going to be for students that are really kind of focusing on doing their best on the PSC. It's going to be the hard practice. And so that's going to be instruction that's not available elsewhere. It's not in our books. And it will actually have complete some modules. And then foundations is going to be like less intense, but just trying to get a better understanding of there. And so these are live, not like a webinar here, but you can actually ask questions, and these are real groups here. So those are live. They're running multiple times starting on October 1st, and so hopefully there's one of those that makes sense for you. And those you can go on the Applerouth website, and there you can sign up tonight. So I see we got some questions, Jed.
We do. All right, so Q&A. Let's dive in. From the top, is the actual SAT going to be digital? SAT digital, yes. ACT. Okay, so they've had a computer-based ACT since 2019. However, it's not adaptive. It's an exact replica of the paper, so there's no advantage. It's not more efficient. It's not faster. And they're going to be piloting that to individuals. So on a national test day, for about 7 years, they've been giving it to certain schools, certain districts, kind of pre-testing it and so forth. But now they're going to offer individuals on test day, do you want to take it on a computer or on paper? But there's no advantage. It's not faster, more efficient, no more tools. So I don't see any benefit, honestly. But they're trying to compete. But the real step here is going computer adaptive, which they're not doing. They're just making a computer-based, like a PDF of the paper, which to me doesn't get you really anything. So I don't see the benefit of it. But the real push is adaptive. But yeah, eventually it'll happen, but not this year, not next year.
Yeah, I think some schools in Atlanta are piloting that.
It's happening in Atlanta, and they're going to be rolling it out. Like there are like 5,000 or so kids. There are summer schools in December, but late next year, it's going to be pretty widely available. But again, I don't really. If I were a student, I wouldn't do it. I don't know what you get from it. All right. Well, to make it easier for homeschoolers to be able to take the PSAT, we've been shut out of our local testing location. Honestly, you're going to have to still find one that makes it available to you, even though it's on the computer. They need to give you a spot. So if they don't, giving you a seat, I don't know if it'll get any easier with this change.
Yeah, it's so digital testing does not mean testing on demand, and it does not mean at home testing for the PSAT or digital SAT. You would still have to take it into have a school. And so, that's a great question, but I don't know the answer of that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Is there a chance to take practice digital PSATs for October? You can take one tonight. You can take one tomorrow. We're going to have 2 at Applerouth. We're going to have 4 at the Blue Book and 2 at Applerouth. So yeah, that's 6 different tests, plenty of practice, and also all of our webinars and our master classes and so forth. All right. Since we'll be judged on how we do on difficult questions and have different value points for each, should we start from the end of the first module so our final score isn't limited?
Can I grab that one?
Yeah, Matt, all you, babe.
All right. So I like the thinking you're trying to be strategic. So for one, on the reading and writing modules, like the words and context questions generally go increase in difficulty, but then the last, not the whole section. And so I think that trying to find the hardest questions while you're in each little subcategory is just a waste of time on the reading and writing, because they're going to be, yes, each sort of, they're supposed to go kind of sequentially in terms of in each topic, but they're switching between 12 topics. So I would not do that on reading and writing whatsoever. Now on math is sort of interesting. So again, it's algorithmic, and so worst case scenario I think is that if you go do that and you spend a lot of time on those hardest questions, and then you don't answer 1, 2, and 3, those questions are super easy. The math modules start off very basic. I think that actually would do more damage to your score, because they would look at there's clearly some content gaps or something. And so I think it would actually be better, even though you can't say that the hardest question is necessarily worth 1,000 more points. That's not really the way that item response scoring is working, because they expect very few students to get that right, and so it actually does kind of affect the weight a little bit differently. I would start at question 1 and just do your best and move through those.
All right. If you have old practice materials, Matt, from last year, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, are these things still useful?
Sort of.
Sort of, yeah.
I mean, grammar is grammar.
Yeah.
Math is math. The reading is very different on there. But if we're talking the question I'm seeing on the top here, the Khan is updated with the digital test. College Board is updated with the digital test. College Board has put a problem bank on there. So I don't know that you need to be going into old resources. They've actually increased the number of resources quite a bit.
Yeah.
In the last couple of weeks.
There's a very specific question from Brian. Not seeing the decimal icon on the Blue Book app. Can decimal be used at will when answering math problems in the Blue Book app?
I can, yeah. So to Brian's question here, when you're doing a student response one, you just type it in, right? You're not clicking on a pad with your mouse. You type it in. So if you need a decimal, you just hit the period button. And then if you need a fraction, you hit the slash. And so you negative, you hit the dash. So I don't think that you can definitely do it. And if the answer is 1/2, you can do 1/2, or you can do 0.5. It's going to be flexible in those kind of
yeah, perfect. Time shifting. If I finish module 1 early, can I use that time in module 2? The answer is no. You are locked in. You have 35 minutes. That goes away. So the time resets at the end of the module. You can't reuse that time. Is there any official book for the digital PSAT? A digital PSAT physical book?
Yeah, I mean, there is they've just published the College Board Digital SAT guide, and they have practice tests in there, and then they basically tell you it's better to take it online, which is kind of a it's thank you for buying our $30 book, but actually go online. It's pretty amazing. That's been kind of the gossip around the inventory today.
Love it. There's a question of, is this test item adaptive? Do the questions get harder And the answer is no, it's section adaptive. The section is set. So you can get an easier, harder, full section, but the items don't change. It's not that granular. It's not moving based on each. That's like the GMAT. That is not the SAT at all. Okay. I think we've already talked about how adaptive modules impact scores.
I mean, if you go to the lower one, it does cap your score, right? Like that's the best.
If because again, if you miss 7 questions in the first section, you're not getting 700 today on paper tests. So if you miss 7 questions, you're capped already, no matter paper or digital. But if you get a lot right on the first and tank, you are getting credit for those you got right. So, I wouldn't worry that much about that. There's a little bit of a pop for going to the more advanced section. But ultimately, you get credit for the points that you get right and wrong. Are you hearing that colleges will super score across the paper and digital SAT? We know that we've heard a few schools. Harvard said we're doing it. We've heard Columbia said they're doing it. There haven't been that many schools come out and say it, because again, they still have time to tell kids, because this current round of kids who are going to be applying are not going to have a digital SAT. They're going to be applying. Everything's in. The first digital test is in March, so they still have some time to go forward and to share that. We expect many of them, many more will, because there's no change in score. In scaling. So a 1450 on the paper is equivalent with, the 10 points on their analysis of the digital test. There is no correlating, there's no shifting, there's no tables. So because of that, it's much, much, much easier to super score. There's also the challenge of, over the past year, there have been kids getting official scores on digital tests. They've been doing like pilots, they count, they have scores that they count. And so for a school to say, we're not going to count your pilot thing, we don't expect much of that, but we're going to obviously hear more about it. But we expect there'll be a lot more schools super scoring than when this test changed in 2016, when there were very, very few, because the scores were recentered and that changed. All right. Is it harder to get a higher competitive score with digital test? No, I would say it's not harder. Matt, do you have any differential?
I mean, it's some different skill sets. I'll just say that.
Different skill sets. Yeah,
yes.
like that. But not necessarily harder, because again, the kids who they gave the paper to and the digital to, on average, they were scoring, with like 10 points. So most kids can handle a computer. And though there are some shifts in terms of I'm better on this skill versus that, but speed's less of an issue. There are a lot of things why these kids prefer it, but these things tended to go pretty well. Is the virtual PSAT test for the 9th graders proctored?
So virtual, I mean, like, I don't know if you mean there's a virtual or digital. Like, if you're gonna, like, if you want to practice, then it's self-proctored, like the blue book. If you're taking it, there is going to be a PSAT 8-9, but some 9th graders are going to just take the regular PSAT. The school just lumps it all together. And then that would be, if you're taking the real one, it would be proctored in the school.
Yeah. All right. There are questions about what's a good score. Well, the PSAT is not a college admissions test. No, that's not for college admissions. A good score is going to be the middle 50 range and up. For type in College Board, like big futures for a school, University of Maryland or Georgia or Virginia or USC, and look for their applying testing ranges. And you want to be on the middle upper end of that middle 50 range for a competitive score.
Yeah. Livy asked a good question here. What's the difference between the PSC and SAT? Like, there was some differences in the number of questions and the timing, but now they are exactly the same structure. And it's just there are a couple of math concepts that aren't, like, they're not going to test on equations of a circle on the PSAT. But they're very similar, and you can definitely use an SAT test, practice test, a digital SAT practice test to practice for the PSAT.
Cool. Is there a platform where you can get extra practice on a certain kind of problem you're missing? It's Khan Academy.
Khan Academy, and then there's a problem bank you can sort. Yeah.
College Board problem bank. Does the amount of time you take on each question affect your score at all? No. It's just the number right or wrong in the module. You go back and forth, change it. They don't care about, I spent 8 minutes on this one, a minute on that one. It's just at the end they calculate right and wrong.
Unless there's something with the item response score where they're not telling us, and then if you change your answer or something,
That's
I mean that's even crazy.
I
So
I think at the end you just send up your text file of your answers, and they're not time stamping, and that's
they're
just way
not,
too much.
yeah, you're not using a camera, they're not watching your eyes. It's fine.
Yeah, that would be hardcore. Um, why does right, the big question, Ruth, why does verbal count twice for national merit? Because it's stupid. And it's archaic. And this used to make sense when there was in in 2005, they added a separate standalone writing sections. There was a reading section, independent, writing independent, and math. So 2 of 3 were writing and reading. Now there's just verbal and math, similar items, similar time. Having verbal count the same is just to keep the scores in line with previous years. But it makes no sense. It's idiotic and it's a mistake. But they're trying to be able to compare. I had a 223 last year to this year. Although now they're, again, they really gutted writing. There's fewer writing concepts. So counting writing a third really privileges, and it makes reading just loom so large.
Yeah.
So it's a bad idea.
Because there are no subscores in the reading and writing in terms of like the current paper SAT has it where it's 400 points of reading, 400 points of writing, and now they're all blended. I can say that I attended a college board meeting and I asked that questions before it came out, and that decision was entirely on national merit, and the college board had no input on how they were going to use the PSAT scores, and I don't think honestly that they were happy with that decision.
It's utter idiocy, total mistake. But this happens sometimes. So will there be a character limit on number of decimals to round 2? On the paper version, you had 4 Scantron things. Matt, can you go?
Yeah, I think it's 5, 5 plus a negative sign is now. And yeah, there are like, if you had like some sort of complex decimal, you would want to put in all those digits on there.
Does it check if your answer is in a valid format for the grid-ins, Matt? Is that if you like?
That's I haven't tried just typing in, spelling out like 72 as letters, but actually like that's worth messing with. But I would probably think it does, but yeah, I just never crossed my mind to like to beta test it that way. That's actually yeah. Because you're never putting in like an expression or an equation. It's never going to be in terms of X or another variable. It's always going to be a numerical answer on those grid-ins.
Yeah. National merit, it's allocated by state. So Arkansas, their cut score is different than West Virginia, different than Delaware. There's certain states, Jersey, Cali, have really high ones.
In Massachusetts,
yeah, super high. Other ones, Arkansas, in certain places, lower.
and
so go and look. And they publish it every year. The national merit cut scores. Google that.
Yeah.
I think
and boarding schools have their own too.
The boarding schools.
Boarding schools have their own cutoff thing. Yeah, and it's like ridiculously high.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Do we tutor in person or virtual or both?
Yeah.
We do both. A lot of virtual, a lot of online tutoring. Which we've been doing for about 10 years, 11 years. Before we were on Zoom before everyone knew what Zoom was. So we had a lot of experience with that over the past 10, 12 years. Will the masterclass cover Desmos, Matt?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you'll get practice answering questions with Desmos integrated in.
Will Desmos automatically display the graphs for each answer option, or will the student need to enter the equations one by one?
You have to enter in everything into Desmos. You do have to type in whatever they gave you and then type it into Desmos. Desmos isn't just going to do it for you. You have to do some data entry, but it is really efficient typing it in there.
Right. Khan Academy's original practice, Matt mentioned there is a lot of overlap. I mean, the content, like reading skills, are still reading skills, grammar skills, even though there are fewer of them assessed, they're still grammar skills. If you burn through all of Khan's content and you burn through our practice, it's not the worst thing in the world to go back to older material. I think there's still a lot of, especially like the math concepts are still the math concepts. There's more reading, but that's not going to change the actual math being assessed. And so it's still valid to go back. Ideally, burn through all of the current practice first. because you know, like the reading style is different. But if you crush old SATs, again, these things are highly correlated. So if you're you know, rocking and rolling on the old paper ones, that should be a strong prediction of how you do on the digital ones too. All right. Well, the masterclass you're offering in October, go over. Yes.
Yeah, I think just ask that question.
We got that one. Matt, we knocked it
Did it.
out.
All right.
That's it. That's it.
You're working up a sweat here with all these questions.
Good questions. Thank you. Good, great crowd. Our pleasure. If you need any help with the stuff, let us know. It's what we've been doing for 23 years. And thanks so much. We'll be giving more talks about this and about the full-scale SAT, and more webinars, more articles, more newsletters. And thanks for being here, y'all. All right. Have a good night.